Hey guys, welcome back to ConExpo 2023. We're here on behalf of Chevron today. I'm your host, Rick Velko.
I'm Brian Furness, and we're both here with Diesel and Iron. Like Rick said, we're here on behalf of Chevron. Thank you guys for bringing us out. And here at the end of the table, introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah, my name is Zach Sutton. I am with Chevron Lubricants. I'm what they call an industrial and coolants and grease sector manager.
So let's dive into that title. What do you do?
You get a little tongue-tied. I handle marketing for our industrial lubricants and our industrial coolant line and also greases.
Okay. And here today, we're talking specifically about greases. Because as dumb dirt guys, grease is grease. It's the slimy, nasty stuff that we have to deal with. We hate our life every time we pull one of those stinking tubes out. But you're telling me there's more to it than just grease is grease.
Well, usually it goes just to color, right?
Yeah.
Everyone goes to just bring me some red grease.
Yeah,
Right.
Red, blue, gray, pick your color. Sometimes there's clear ones.
Yes.
Those are always surprising when you pull them out of the box.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What is all this stuff?
Well, first thing, a misnomer is that color doesn't matter, right?
Okay.
Other than it helps you define where it might go on a piece of equipment. You're used to knowing that the red is going into that component, and it helps you understand that. But from a performance standpoint, there's no attribute for what color provides.
Yeah.
So, how much goes in the grease? Because it's just a lubricant.
And there's that I'll try to break it down as simple as possible. There's the thickener, right? So there's a variety of thickener types in the marketplace, and we'll get into that a little bit. There's the oil, right? So you can either have a mineral oil or a synthetic base oil. And then the last part is the additives, right? And the additives are really what's the secret sauce to make sure that the grease is working based upon where the application is.
So what we think of as grease is really, and what we feel is the grease, is really the thickener. But the stuff within the thickener is what's doing the work on the machine?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the thickener is really what we call the vehicle. It's what enables the grease to end up where you need that component to be lubricated. But really what you're hoping for is that once it's at that component, think of a pin and bushing, right? When they come together, right, it's a really extreme pressure.
Sure.
And that's where the thickener gets squeezed and that oil comes out. And the oil is actually doing the lubricating.
So, obviously, there's multiple types of grease that are out on the market today that you guys are producing. Why so many selections, and how much, besides the color, how much can you actually manipulate and control with the grease?
So that's a little bit more complicated question. So typically in North America, it's pretty much 70% of the marketplace is a lithium-based product. And as you guys have seen in the show, what's the number one topic people are talking about here?
Lithium.
How expensive lithium is?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we've had to think about too, just like everyone else is thinking about alternative fuel sources, we're thinking about alternative thickeners because we know that the challenges with lithium demand it's predominant in the industry right now.
Yeah.
So we're excited. We're going to be introducing an over-base calcium sulfonate complex grease. I know that's a lot of words.
Ooh, my goodness.
But
a
that's
different thickener.
A different thickener. But what this thickener does that we're excited about is that it helps shed water.
Oh, nice.
And so in this industry, that is one of the number one issues that brings a component out of service early in life. Right?
Yeah.
So we're really excited about bringing that product. It'll be coming out this year.
Excellent. So let's talk. So I do want to back up because I feel like we glazed over a really cool part of the way grease works. So when you slam your bucket down into that dirt and it slams that pin against the bushing,
Yeah.
it's not that the grease is just already there and it's lubricating. That force is actually squeezing the oil out of the thickener component of the grease.
Correct.
And then providing the lubrication.
Yeah, and in your pin and bushing, typically you'll, and I don't have one of those in front of me, but typically you're going to want an additional additive, moly, inside that grease, right?
Now, this is not the moly that most of our industry is familiar with, correct?
No.
What do you mean when
I
you
had to
say
think
moly?
about that for a minute.
I'm glad you just dive and say yes.
We're getting you woke up this morning.
There we go. No, moly is a component that Caterpillar, for example, really prefers in their pins and bushings, and you'll see like a 5% moly in the grease itself. And what that does for the grease is that it provides a sacrificial layer, so that when that pin and bushing come together, it still lubricates, but it also helps avoid the wearing aspect that happens in that element.
So
Interesting.
How do you guys kind of go about testing grease? So how do I even know? So you guys are doing all this data collection, you're doing all the testing. How do I even know to buy the right grease, whether it's for like a ring and pinion or for just pins on a hydraulic or a big turntable? How do I even know what grease I'm looking for and go about?
Well, one thing you just brought up something that I think is a challenge within the industry. Too often we see too many greases in a shop.
Sure.
And it's actually an opportunity where you could consolidate products by knowing what your OEMs are asking for in your components. Typically, all you need is a multi-purpose grease for most applications, which is a 220 type grease. And when I say 220, that's viscosity grade.
Okay.
Then you need a moly grease if you're running some yellow iron and it has pins and bushings, because typically that's what they're going to want in that component. And then if you have electric motors, you're going to want a low conductivity grease.
Okay.
You can pretty much get away with those three elements in your shop. Anything beyond that, it's because of the complexity of your operation.
And so, dealing with our industry where we are a color and shapes people,
Yeah.
what do we need to look at instead of looking at the color of the grease? What do we need to actually look and pick up and glance at on that tube before we make that selection?
Yeah, so what we're excited about, the first thing that we've done in this program that we've done is redo the packaging of our grease cartridges so you can quickly identify what's in there. And the number one thing is viscosity. As I mentioned earlier, it's the oil that actually does the lubricating from the grease. The thickener is the protector. It's the outer side of it. It helps you get the grease or the oil to the actual component to lubricate. So from our view, you need to have the right viscosity grade, and that's what you want to really look at first, and that's based upon what your OEM's asking for.
Okay, so
I got a question for you. Sorry.
All right.
that's all right. It's all right.
I just ran out of grease halfway through my machine.
Okay.
Of the correct lithium grease. And I go over and I grab just another tube of grease that's been rolling around back the truck so I can finish greasing.
This one's clear. That's the
This
surprise
one's clear. We went from red to clear. Obviously, might have two different applications. Is there something happening between the two greases when I throw that into the grease fitting and I start shooting it into the pin?
Yeah, so you're bringing up something else that's very important with grease is compatibility, right? So lithium versus calcium sulfonate versus polyurea, which is that low conductivity thickener type. You have to be careful with that. Typically, what you want to make sure you do is you purge the system so that you fully get the previous grease out of there. So if you were going to go use that other grease and you had nothing else in the shop, you definitely want to make sure you try to put enough in there that it purges out of the system.
So that's where you go get the apprentice and tell him he's getting an arm workout because we got to run the whole tube, maybe even two through that pin before we consider it done.
But in the industry, grease is grease, and as long as you're greasing, you're good.
Right. For all of us in the field, yeah 100%.
And you're telling me there's a little more technical side that goes to this.
This is where we run into questions, right? That's when they come in and ask experts, why is this grease chunking out, or why is this grease falling apart? It can sometimes have to deal with either compatibility, but more often than not, it's either lack of grease or over operation of that component with either temperature or how the operation has changed. Usually we're looking for elements like that, or you're using a slower what we call a slower grease for a high RPM application. We run into different elements there that can cause a grease to not perform as well as we want it to.
So I know this industry.
Yeah.
Granddaddy and I go down to Tractor Supply and we grab that box of grease because it's $10 for the box. Is it really worth changing over? Like, what is the response to just kind of the old school mentality of this has always worked, why are we going to do anything different?
This is the number one question we would get when I was out in the field working with people like yourselves. I think the biggest thing is to understand is that you really want a high quality grease that's been formulated for the performance of what your equipment's up for. sometimes you'll find that there are boutique blending that happens with grease. So you want to make sure that grease is designed for what your OEM's looking for. Viscosity grade, thickener type, and making sure all the attributes meet what your OEM is looking for.
So is there a certain ideal temperature that we should be using the grease at or greasing with? You know, if you're up into Arctic temperatures and you're making negative 32, and then up in Florida or Michigan, it's humid and hot and it's 95 today. Is there a certain time, or is it any kind of application? Because let's be realistic, the tube of grease been rolling around the back of my truck for weeks, baking in between the rainstorms.
Yeah. So ideally, you know, in those extreme temperatures, that's when you want to think about a synthetic grease, right?
Okay.
So getting back to oil, that's what the difference is. The base, your base greases typically are a mineral oil, and you have a pretty wide operating temperature. But when you get into a synthetic, that's where you can get the protection needed for an Arctic or Florida. Typically, like when I spent a lot of time in northern Nevada, we would look at, like, say, the conveyance system or something that we knew that was being impacted by high ambient temperature and low ambient temperature. We always deferred to more of a synthetic base.
So if you are working in extreme temperatures, that's where you might step outside of the box of the 3 basic greases. You may get a little more complicated just so that it better suits the equipment for that environment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is there a way that we should be storing the grease at a shop or out in the field, you know, in different kind of elements?
Is the truck bed okay? Let's just call it what it is.
I don't want it in my toolbox or all over.
That's right.
And then if I throw it in the truck, somehow it gets stepped on and it's everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. There's nothing like having tools with grease all over it, right?
It's the worst. I always tell my subscribers, if I'm greasing a machine on the camera, they're going to end up with grease on them somehow. Like, that's how grease works.
Yeah.
You know what? That's another good point, though. How critical is it to actually just wipe the Zerk fitting off?
Oh, I think that's an important thing, right? You want to get as much of the dust, dirt, and whatnot that can get inside that component away from it.
But what's really happening if I just stick it on there without wiping and I just start greasing until I see that was my
Whoa,
fault.
professional.
Until you see the grease start squirting out the sides.
Yeah.
What did I just do?
You just introduce some dirt and aspects that you don't want in that component.
But it's grease now.
Well, typically you would think grease would shed that, but unfortunately you may be sending some dirt back into that component, which then creates the abrasive wear that you don't want.
Well, and most of the time that Zerk fitting, for most of them, is right in the middle of that pin. So it's going to take a while for that dirt to work its way out, and it's grinding on that pin and that bushing the whole way out.
Yeah.
I can see how that's problematic.
So what's over greasing and under greasing in your guys' ideal world?
Yeah. Typically, you're going to look at it from, I always have to defer back to what the user manual is, but right. But no grease is the last thing you
want.
want.
Come on now.
You're good until she starts squeaking.
Yeah,
that's when you're going to go fly, right?
But we were having a great conversation earlier talking about when you need to grease a pin and bushing and what it should look like. And definitely you want to know that grease is a bit on the edge, right?
Okay.
That it's actually applicating all the way across the pin and bushing. So I would definitely defer to that.
Okay.
But you can over-grease a unit. We've seen that happen. That tends to happen where with electric motors, for example. We definitely recommend an electrician's out there greasing the motor than probably, say, a typical operator greasing that motor.
So, shifting gears a little bit. Grease has been around for a long time. Are we making big technological advances still in grease, or is it pretty well dialed in?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, lithium is high demand right now. Mm-hmm. And due to the rising raw material costs, we definitely have to think about other options. And then as you think about electrification, you're going to have to think about thickener types that respond differently for low conductivity with electric motors. So we believe that the over-base calcium sulfonate is something that will outperform what we've seen in typical lithium complex. So that will be great for this industry. And then, for example, a polyurea grease, we believe that's going to be an evolution that's going to fit for the electrification side.
So you guys are still actively changing and adapting and evolving the product.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you the packaging. I'm going to hold it up for a quick second.
Sure.
One of the things that we wanted to do was focus on our packaging, so it clearly designed a name based upon thickener type.
Yep.
So that's a big thing for us, is simplifying both for the customer and for those that are out
Flash
selling
that up to
grease.
the camera there so they can
All
take
right,
a look
there
at
you
it.
go.
Yeah.
See, it says Starplex. That's for astronauts.
That's right.
So this is our Lithium Complex product, and you'll see that this is the new name. This is the old name, and this old name, I mean, you can see here with this product was a bit hard for customers to define. Actually did this is where the marketing part comes in.
Sure.
We did a customer survey and captured feedback, and that was one of the first things they said, I just don't know what all this means.
Yeah.
So we tried to simplify that and take it down. So Starplex is the thickener type. You see the HD part, that's the viscosity grade. So I was talking about the oil, so it's a typical 460. Very normal in your off-road environment.
Okay.
And then you have NLGI, which is 2 here on this package.
And what is NLGI?
So it's the thickness of the thickener.
Okay, so it's how well the grease is going to stay in that fitting once you grease it.
So typically you're talking about summer versus winter. NLGI grades make a big difference there. And so you go with a 2 in the summer usually if you're in a high temp setting. You go with a 1 in a cold temperature setting.
That's what I was going to ask is how does that system work? Is it the lower the number, the thicker the grease?
No, actually it's reverse.
The higher the number, the thicker the grease.
Yeah, so you actually start at like triple aught, which is fluid.
Okay.
And then you go double aught and single aught, and those are all a little bit on the lighter side.
Okay.
And then 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's how the NLGI system works. So a 4 would be the thickest.
Gotcha.
So how much more information is really on this tube of grease? You got a V460 down there.
Yep.
Right. You got the color red. What's this trying to tell to the end consumer? What's on here?
Well, the most important thing is that it's a point of reference, right? So if you did have a new, say, a new mechanic that was working on a unit, and he didn't know anything about grease, we wanted to give him as much information so he could refer back to the manual, right?
Yep.
So you've got viscosity grade, NLGI grade, you got the thickener type and color. You get those elements figured out, you should be able to grease.
Yeah, you're on your way.
Perfect.
You're on the way. You're on the way. So we're really excited about this, and one of the pandemic things is QR codes. We've actually included a QR code on these cartridges, which enables you to have the PDS, which gives you a full breakdown of the grease. You were asking earlier about formulation, and then also the safety data sheets, which from my past, if a mine safety inspector is looking for something like that, they can quickly access it and get that information.
MSDS is
Perfect.
right there.
Correct. Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I got to ask, Zach, you've been in the industry a while.
Yeah.
Personal opinion, what's been the biggest change that you've seen in this grease industry?
I think for us over the last 2-3 years is supply chain, right?
Really?
Yeah, we had some unfortunate events that have happened in the last 2 years. A fire happened at a plant that took about 25% of production offline.
Wow.
In North America. Yeah, exactly. So we've had to recover from that. It's not just us, it's across industry. I think that the number one thing that we've run into for our customers is, can you get me the product? And that's the number one thing I think that's changed pre-pandemic, post-pandemic for me in terms of what I've seen. Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to shift gears totally.
Yeah, let's go.
We're like 4 days into the show.
Yeah.
What stuck out to you personally? Just as you walk around, what stuck out to you at Discount Expo?
Oh, well, I was at the last one, so I'm still here. That's good.
Yeah, you made it.
Never
You
left.
didn't party too hard the last time around?
Well, no, everyone was trying to get a flight out. I think the last one was when the pandemic started.
Well, that's
so.
true, yeah. That's true.
It's great to see a lot of old faces. I've spent 10 years at Chevron. I was in sales for a number of years. And before that, I was with a tire company. And I'd spent about 8 years in the same industry. So 18 years, you get a lot of familiar faces, and it's been great to see them after not seeing people for a number of years. So for me, that stood out. I think the changes as the evolution of engines to how equipment design's changing. If you're not spending enough time on the floor to take a look, you're missing out, because I think this industry's changing quite rapidly.
So last one, Zach.
Yeah.
If you could give any bits of wisdom to the mechanics, to the end users, wherever you want to take that, what would it be?
Man, there's nothing better than learning in the field.
Yeah.
I will say that. I am a college graduate, but I've enjoyed more time behind the windshield, out in the field with an operator, learning about what they do,
Yeah.
and understanding what they're up against every day, and trying to help them keep their equipment up and running. So my advice is listen and learn from those that have come before you, and try to help those that are coming behind you. Pass on your information, pass on your knowledge, so that it makes them better in what they do every day.
I will say this is 100% genuine. One thing that has stuck out to me about you guys at Chevron is it doesn't seem to be come buy our product because we're selling our product. It's, hey, we want to come alongside you. We want to help you grow your business. We want to help you succeed. That is 100% authentic. It comes across as authentic,
100%.
and we really appreciate that about you guys. So,
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. I think for us, is we got to appreciate the customer and listen to the customer, and I think that's something that culturally we were always working on.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Zach, thank you so much for being on.
All right, guys.
This
Thanks,
is
guys.
awesome. So you guys be sure to check back at 3 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific time.
You know, right about the time I get that down, we're going to be back on Eastern time, and I'm going to still confuse myself.
I know it's going to be great. Thank
3
you, guys.
p.m. We'll see you guys.
Thank you, guys.